Chapter 32. The Good. As Tom moved from the bad news to the good, Sky felt a warm glow. This is what she needed to hear, how she would help. Unfortunately, broken children had always been part of the world, but it made her feel good to help put them back together. The others nodded and smiled as Tom named all the friends that were alive and well as of the last check-in with the other towns. More survived than she expected given the desolate condition of Colton. They'd left, gone higher into the hills or crossed state lines to get closer to relatives. The few families remaining in town pooled their resources together, keeping watch as a group with each person able taking a turn. Sky nodded. Smart. Kinda like a neighborhood watch. But Trish's shoulders sagged. Who would have ever thought we'd be in this situation? Lots of people did, you just didn't listen to them, Wade said as he crossed his arms and leaned back in his seat. The group exchanged looks. The man had a point. There had been no lack of end-of-the-world scenarios. Well, we're in it now, anyway. Tom stood and waved toward the door. I usually take a drive through town before dinner. See if there's anything that needs taken care of. Yes, please, you boys, go with him, Trish said. I worry so about him out there alone. He corrals up any sick he sees all by himself. It can't be helped, Trisha. Tom ran a hand down his wife's arm. Someone's got to do it, and I'm the one with the badge. That is the job, and I'm gonna do it until I'm told not to. I know. Trisha sighed. Better than them showing up here looking for dinner, and us, when they smell it cooking. Goosebumps trailed down Sky. Was this something she should watch for? She turned her rounded eyes to Dylan, and he nodded in agreement. Had the sick shown up at Cole's place when she was cooking? How many times had she fired up the stove without a thought, and all the while one of them were on the lookout? This was yet another way Wade and Dylan had helped Jessie and her. Every time I have this figured out, there's another thing I don't know. Jessie grabbed Tom's attention before he left. When you been out there, have you seen my dad? And do you know anything about Grandma and Sue Ellen? Sky's heart dropped at his question. His family had been on his mind, and Sky had only been able to give him small reassurances. Dylan reached out and laid a comforting hand on Jessie's shoulder, and Jessie leaned into him. Well, I haven't seen your dad, Jessie. Tom was gentle but candid. But that can be a good thing. Many of the sick end up roaming through town at some point. I haven't been going out as far as your house, but as soon as there's a good day, I'll check it. That sound good? Jessie nodded. Now your grandmother and Sue Ellen, a guy in their town on the radio gave me a list of survivors. Let me go get it. Tom walked to the other room and came back with a sheet of paper. This is from 2 days ago, and Sue Ellen was okay. He leaned down to Jessie, showing him Sue Ellen's name on the list. Jessie solemnly stared at it for a moment before looking back up at Tom, a smile breaking out on his face. I'm sorry to say your grandmother isn't on the list. That's okay. Jessie's quick reply told everyone what they needed to know about that relationship. Who is she with? Dylan asked. They didn't tell me that, Tom said. Any way to get her here? Dylan asked. She's Jessie's family. We take care of our own, it's what we do. Tom smiled. Of course, I'll see what can be arranged. Trisha waved everyone to the kitchen. Before y'all take off, have a snack. Dessert is ready. Sky sighed as she bit into the soft, chewy cookie. As always, these are delicious. Trisha had to accept the grunts of the men, and that each grabbed a second one before the first had left their mouths as signs of approval. Jessie couldn't be stopped from swiping a steaming hot cookie right off the pan. Trisha glowed. It's so nice to have y'all here. Why don't you stay over? Just for the night? Tom agreed. I could use the help with a couple of heavy chores I need to get to, if you can spare the time. Everything's covered at the cabin, Dylan said as Wade nodded. Any reason you can think of that we can't, Sky? Her lips curved in a smile. Nope, everything is fine for me. Seems we're good then, Dylan said, while Sky, Trisha, and Jessie playfully danced around the kitchen. This time together meant a lot more than it ever would have before. Dylan looked around the room. You need me to go out and get something? No hunting required, Trisha said. But some gathering. The neighbor's freezer built up a frost, half covering a big ham. You could chip that out of there. I've been hoping to have an occasion to use it. Dylan gave a sharp nod. Easiest huntin' I ever did. Quickly, Trisha figured out the menu. That ham, some sweet potatoes, greens. Oh, I forgot. We brought you some squash. Sky said. And some other stuff. Wade clapped and rubbed his hands together. Sounds like we're gonna be eatin' good tonight. Later that night, Sky stared at the ceiling as she lay on the guest room's bed. Trisha had made Dylan, Wade and Jessie comfortable in the living room. Sky patted her still full stomach and smiled. The pleasant evening had been a welcome relief after the last couple of days. She was fortunate to have friends and family left, many probably didn't. Sky sighed and turned to her side. She needed to call her dad, that was one reason she wanted to come here. Sky bit the inside of her cheek. It was also something she found increasingly difficult to do. The small knot in the pit of her stomach had wound tighter and tighter throughout the day. One worry after another flooded her mind. Tom's news told how dangerous the cities were becoming. Even if her family survived the disease, would they survive the chaos? If yesterday taught her anything, it was that she couldn't get to her family no matter how much she wanted to do so. Good or bad, I have to know how they're doing. I refused to think about the whole situation today, but I need to call as soon as I can tomorrow. Sky closed her eyes, but her worries didn't allow sleep. She turned to her other side. It was too quiet. Used to the noises men and boys made in their sleep, the silence was overwhelming. Sky rolled her eyes. She should be glad to get away from it for one night. But the sounds had stopped being an irritation a long time ago. They meant Wade and Dylan were near and that meant safety. Sky huffed at her insecurity but stopped herself. There were certainly enough valid reasons for unease right now. She rose, wrapped a blanket around her, and tucking a pillow under her arm, she tiptoed down the stairs. Wade and Jessie were deep in snoring slumber as they lay on the floor, but Dylan sat up, his head leaning against the back of the couch. He raised his head as soon as he saw her. Sky stopped in the living room's doorway. For a minute, she stared at Dylan across the darkened room. Her anxiety eased. Dylan nodded Sky toward the empty recliner that was beside the couch he sat on. He knew why she was here. She went to it and slid onto the seat, then raised the footrest. Sky turned toward Dylan. He stared at her, his eyes direct, intense. Her gaze fluttered to the ground, then back to him. She didn't look away again until a slow smile curved the side of Dylan's mouth. She pinked a bit and smiled back. Then Sky arranged her blanket and closed her eyes. The couch springs squeaked as Dylan lay down. His quiet breathing soon turned to a comforting, soft snore. It lulled Sky to sleep.